Let's quickly go through how our webinar will proceed today. We'll start with the presentation segment that will last approximately 45 minutes. Please note that this part of the webinar will be recorded. All participants will be notified via email once the recording is available for viewing. Following the presentation, we have scheduled a question and answer session that will last around 10 to 15 minutes. This part will not be recorded, so please feel free to ask questions without hesitation. You can address us directly, and if you wish, you can also turn on your camera. You could also use the Q&A option for this purpose. Just a small request to everyone. As mentioned earlier, our German-speaking colleagues, Eva and Michaela, are unwell today. We would request you to post your questions in English kindly. I did learn a bit of German back in college, but I speak and understand very basic German as I was not very attentive in language class. However, coming back to our topic for today, the journey from research findings to published articles is often paved with challenges, especially for early career researchers. Understanding the basics of manuscript writing is essential to navigate this terrain effectively. Our webinar today, Basics of Manuscript Writing, How to Prepare Your Manuscript for Journal Acceptance, serves as a guiding beacon for researchers embarking on this crucial stage of their academic career. In this insightful session, we will unravel the intricate process of manuscript preparation, equipping participants with the fundamental tools and strategies needed to craft compelling and publication-ready manuscripts. From structuring your manuscript to adhering to journal guidelines, we will explore every facet of the writing process, ensuring that your work stands out amidst the sea of submissions. Whether you're a graduate student, early career researcher, or a seasoned academic, you will find important tips and suggestions from our expert speaker today. Today's topics will cover introduction to scientific publishing, getting your paper into shape, and a bit about ethics, especially in the age of generative AI. And our speaker today is Valerie Tengbrook. We are delighted to have you with us today, Valerie, and I will now pass on the baton to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Vishal. I think I have a lot to cover today. So just a brief introduction about myself. My name is Valerie Teng. I'm based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and I have been working with Elsevier for a very long time as a publisher. And most recently, I'm working in the life sciences, covering, well, biochemistry, biophysics, but specifically genetics and developmental biology. But I have worked with numerous other communities as well. So if you have specific questions about needs of your specific scientific field, then I'm hoping that I'll be able to answer those as well. Let me just quickly share my screen, and then we can get into, here we go. This should give you, let me just double check, Vishal. This is the right screen, right?
Yes,
perfect.
Yes, perfect.
All right. So just to give you an idea of the topics I'll cover, this is the first part, obviously, the introduction to scientific publishing and why should you publish. And then, of course, a choice of your of journals that you would like to publish in that will actually fit best with your research, but also will be able to give you the best opportunities to really display what you have been working on. I'm sorry, but we are going to start with a bit of a history lesson here. In order to understand why we're doing this, I thought I would just give you an idea of the origins of publishing. And it all started actually with the Gutenberg press, which of course you are very much aware of as it was a German invention. And then moving ahead in time to good old Henry Oldenburg, who was actually the founding father of the first scientific research journal and the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. Now, Henry Oldenburg had several things that he had to say about this, and really put this together, his thoughts and ideas of dissemination and so forth. I will get into that in a brief moment. So from the transactions of the Royal Society, we now look at about 46,000 peer-reviewed journals around the world in different scientific fields. These journals have an annual output of about 5.2 million articles a year. So it's really important to be able to stick out, to get your research actually successfully published in the journals that you would like to see them published in, and in the format that you want to publish in as well. Now, going back to what Oldenburg actually said, and which is very true today, is all about these 4 factors, right? Registration, which is, the timestamp basically of the research and when it was submitted and was accepted in a journal. The certification, so making sure that peers around the world are actually reviewing your research and saying, yes, that it is validated and that there's an integrity to your paper. It's also about dissemination, of course, traditionally in the format of a journal, paper journal. Now we still have some paper journals, but predominantly this is, of course, done through online databases like Science Direct. And it is so much easier to discover and share your findings that way. And then lastly, about preservation, making sure that your research is not only seen and appreciated today and maybe a year from now, but into perpetuity, and that it really advances the prosperity of science. Taking another additional role that Henry Oldenburg couldn't actually have thought of when he started his first journal is, of course, use as well. And that is the 5th component, and it really facilitates promoting your research around the world. And that, of course, taps into a lot of social media attention and so forth that you can really play with. Publishers, of course, are increasingly investing in innovation and technology and are trying to find new methods to carry on these 5 different roles. Publishers do coordinate the exchange of ideas between authors, editors, and reviewers, and of course, the wider audience of researchers, and also the government, funders, institutions, and so forth. And this is effectively the community that we serve as publishers, of which you are, I think, the most important part. So now we get into why we need to publish and what to publish. So this question about why publishing, why is it so important? Well, it is necessary to publish your research to ensure that it's credited for, your work is credited for what you've done, and there's a timestamp. This, of course, basically follows the principles of Oldenburg. And of course, the question is, what do we publish? Now, it can be, of course, new and original results or methodologies that you want to cover. It can be a review or a summary of previously published research in a particular subject. I would say that this is usually done by more senior, more seasoned researchers, but it can actually be done by young researchers like yourself as well, of course. Manuscripts are there to advance the knowledge, of course, in your field, and to understand what the new needs of that field are. And you do need, of course, a strong and effective manuscript in order to stand out in this, 5,200,000 manuscripts a year that are being published. So what does a strong manuscript look like? So the scientific message effectively must be clear, it must be useful, and it must be exciting, right? It has to really stand out from the crowd. The author's message must be presented in a constructed in a logical manner, right? This, of course, includes your data. And the reader should arrive at the same conclusions that you have made as an author. When you choose a format, make sure that it clearly showcases your research. Readers, reviewers, and editors should be able to easily grasp what you have worked on for maybe a year, 2 years, even 5 or 10 years, depending on how long your research takes, and the significance really of what you have done. Editors and reviewers are, like yourself, active scientists. So make sure that things are really easily constructed to save everybody's time. A lot of editors are being paid for their role as an honorarium, but certainly this is not the only role that they play in life. In fact, because they're scientists, this is one of the many other hats that they wear. So now I get into the point, the parts of identifying the right journal or journals possibly that you wish to write for. So selecting the right journal can be quite tough, right? So I've made a list of the best practices here. Obviously you want to aim to reach the intended audience of your work, and this can be a very broad audience. You could be looking at maybe science, nature, or cell, or it can be a more specific audience where you feel that your research really sits well with a subject-specific journal. Think about that. Always consult your advisor, your peers, people around you as to where they think your research would sit best. Look at your list of references. So which sources have you taken? Which journals have you tapped into that you could actually possibly also then subsequently publish in? And then from that, shortlist a handful of these journals that you have already thought about and look at what they have published recently, the types of papers, the topics that they've covered, and so forth. Ask yourself the question, is the journal peer-reviewed at the right level? So is it single blind, double blind? How many peer reviews are required for paper to be in good shape? Who is the audience for the journal? So is it a broader, specific audience? How fast does the journal actually publish? And how fast are decisions made? Because if you are just close to getting your PhD, you don't want to wait around for another year or year and a half to get a final decision in your paper, right? What are the important metrics for the journal? So look at the impact factor, site score, H-index, all these other things. Do include social media as well, because I think that's a very important way to also look at metrics. Do you want to, or do you need to publish open access? Does the journal cover that? Is it a hybrid journal? Is it an open access journal? All these things are take those into consideration. And are your co-authors happy with the journal? Assume that you are the corresponding author of this particular paper. Now, one way of checking that a journal is authentic in its nature is using Think, Check, and Submit. And this is an initiative by a group of organizations such as DOAJ, COPE, Biomed Central, and so forth, and some of the publishers. And it really goes into think about the journals that were just recently launched. Are they the right outlet for your research? Maybe they don't have an impact factor yet. Is that important to you or not? There are some rogue or predatory journals out there, and so it's important to do this check just to make sure that in fact things are authentic and these journals are doing what they should be doing. Have you ever read anything in the journal that you want to publish in? Does it actually have a clear indication who the publisher is? Can you contact that publisher for example? And if the answer there is yes, then feel free to submit, but be very careful. I've gotten a lot of authors in the recent past that have submitted to a journal and they say, no, but it's actually not a journal that is authentic and is not, it seems like a predatory journal. How do I withdraw? And it's a very difficult process. I would not advise it. A tool that can help you find right journals, at least for Elsevier, but there's also a tool similar to that for Springer, for example, which is called Journal Suggester. You basically enter your abstract and your title, and then it gives you results as to which is most closely fitted with your research. And then if you look at a specific journal, it will give you impact factor, it will give you the turnaround in editorial time, acceptance rate, and all these different things. And is it, what is the open access rate, for example? Is it optional to publish open access, so forth? It's a good tool, it saves you time, and yeah, as I said, there's various other publishers that do this as well, so it's a good way to do this. Then getting into a bit of the actual meat of the presentation, if you will, getting your paper into shape, right? Because this is how you get published successfully. So one of the things that is incredibly important, of course, is scientific language. We're not writing novels here, we're not writing literature, this is science. Getting the sentences right. So be aware of the sentence structure in general. Sentences should really be constructed in short and factual bursts of information, because long and complicated sentences tend to confuse readers. That's why I say only one idea should be conveyed in each sentence, so that you stick to what you want to say. Multiple statements should be avoided in a single sentence. Average, and I say average length of sentences is about 12 to 15 words, so it's not very long sentences. Then going into language tenses, the present tense should be used for known facts and hypotheses. An example, the average life of a honeybee is 6 weeks. The past tense should be used for describing experiments that have been conducted and the results of these experiments, right? And another example here is the average lifespan of bees in our contained environment was 8 weeks. So that goes into past tense. Be very consistent and correct in this, and make sure that you really use your tenses correctly during the research writing. Then manuscript language grammar. Pay attention to the grammar, because obviously you are writing to an international audience. You may not be a native English speaker, but 95% of your audience isn't either. There's very few native English speakers actually in the world. The passive voice can be used in methods section of your paper, but otherwise the active voice really will needs to be used, and it can actually shorten your sentences as well and be more dynamic in that way and interesting to the reader. Please avoid contradictions and contractions. Contractions being it is, it's, or isn't, or weren't. And please eliminate any redundant words. You're not writing literature, once again. It is very factual what you are trying to convey. Then going into the structure a little bit, this is the structure of a typical research article. The abbreviation is IMRAD. You have the head, which is the title, abstract, and keywords. Of course, these are the ways to find your research in general. Then the main text, introduction, methodology, results, and the discussion. And then, of course, the tail is your conclusion, your acknowledgments, references, and supplementary data if that is relevant to your manuscript. This is, of course, not the way you write your paper, but let's take them step by step so that I can give you a little bit more information about this. So manuscript titles. There's a certain characteristics that are effective in titles, and they should be there to attract the reader's attention, make sure that they contain the fewest possible words. So a very short title. They do need to adequately describe the content and be informative but concise, which is very hard. And identify main issue of what you are writing about. Please don't use any technical jargon or abbreviations, but use formal language. Remember that editors and reviewers don't like titles that make no sense or fail to represent the subject matter adequately. So make sure that you really stick to something that really makes sense with your paper. Then there's the keywords. Obviously, they're the labels or the tags for your manuscript, and they are used for indexing and abstracting services. Please do avoid words that are very broad in meaning. Be very specific because this is the way that your research is going to really shine in your community and be understood by your peers. Only use abbreviations that are firmly established, and obviously in my case it's DNA, RNA, and so forth that nobody has to think about, but rarely use abbreviations. An effective approach is to look at the keywords of other articles, of course, in your manuscript. Then going on to the abstract, it really should be just one paragraph to summarize the problem, the method, the results, and the conclusion, which is tough. It really does act as an advertisement effectively. And it is one of the things that is always read by editors to just really quickly get a snapshot of what they can expect in this paper and whether your paper is going to be suited to be published in their journal. Just given an example here of an abstract, and top part is what has been done, and the bottom part are what are the main findings, basically. What did these people research all this time and found, what was found. Do note that some journals require graphical abstracts or like that. It's a great way to really display what you have been working on in a figurative way. All right, then we move into the introduction. This is, of course, this provides a context for your manuscript, and it will probably convince the readers why your work has really advanced the field of study that you're in. Be concise in the introduction, but do give the reader enough information to understand why the work is important. Shouldn't be a history lesson, but you do need to introduce the main scientific publications on which your work is also based. So where does it sit in literature? Cite a couple of original important works, and do include recent review articles as well. That usually puts it really into context. Do make sure that you clearly address the following. What is a problem that you're ultimately trying to solve? So which part of the research are you addressing? Do identify the solutions, but also the limitations. So what are you not going to cover? And provide a perspective that is consistent with the journal where you are submitting. So make sure it really sits and fits with that journal. Then we move to methods. So please do look at the methodology section of a specific journal. Some journals will say, please be as explicit as possible and almost recreate your methodology there so that it can be almost reproduced basically by the reader, which then taps into discoverability and also into reproducibility. Any previously published procedures should not be rewritten, of course, in detail. Please cite them, or they can be added to the supporting materials section. And then the equipment and materials that you used, maybe reagents, for example, with any other sources that you have used, maybe to adapt the methodology, please include them here, because that is a way to reproduce what you have done. If needed, if you actually have experimented either on animals or humans, of course, you have to have ethics committee approval. And those standards can be national or international, but they can also be specific to a specific journal. So make sure that you really stick with what the journal needs. And there's an explicit statement usually in the guide for authors about that. The results. So this is really where you describe the important results of your research. They really, you should stick with the results that are essential to the discussion. That is the next part, of course. So that means that you only use the data, you only discuss the data of primary importance that you are sharing. Data of secondary importance should be put in either supporting or supplementary materials instead. Please do use subheadings to keep the results of the same type together so that it's clear to the reader. And highlight the findings that are there that advance the understanding of the field that you're working in. Do include illustrations, figures, tables here. They really take away from the laborious writing, of course, and they really will tell the story even better. But do stick with those that are essential, and please don't make tables too long if not necessary. Then we get into the discussion section. This is where you, of course, interpret your results. In my mind, this is the most important section of the article. This is really where you're selling your data effectively. I know that a huge number of manuscripts are actually rejected because the discussion is weak and it doesn't really go into much more of, but just a small description of the results. Do make sure that, of course, the discussion corresponds and complements the results that you have already pulled together. And compare other published results with your own. Don't ignore work that might disagree with your results as well. And confront and convince a reader that you are correct or that your results are actually better than previously published results. Please do be careful to use the following, not to use the following, sorry, statements that go beyond the results that you are supporting, non-specific expressions such as higher temperature or lower rate or something like that. New terms that you haven't already defined or mentioned in your paper, and speculations on possible interpretation that are based on imagination or and not rooted in fact. Then we finally get to the conclusion, which really shows where your work sits to advance the field of research. Be clear in the conclusion to help the reviewers and editors judge your work on its impact, but of course also your readers subsequently, and provide clear justification for your work and how it advanced the field. it can be good to indicate other uses, extensions of your research, and applications of the work as well. Suggest future experiments as well that could build on your work, maybe something that you're already working on yourself, or maybe something that you would like to collaborate with with other people. It's a good way also to find some new topics as well to work on. Then we get into acknowledgments. Of course, we want to thank everybody that was possibly, supporting you, obviously your advisors, maybe people that financially supported you, funded your research, funding bodies, proofreaders, and also suppliers, that maybe had donated or sent you any type of materials, reagents, once again, and so forth to use. Well, I would say that the most of our acknowledgments also come with a conflict of interest statement or competing interest statements, and that you should actually submit alongside your paper to make sure that that's also clear to the editor. Then your list of references. Please don't use too many references, but make sure that they really stick with what you have used to construct your research. Avoid excessive self-citations, so references to your previous work, unless they are very relevant to this paper, and of course they build on your research. If possible, please avoid excessive citations to publications from the same regional institute, unless you are the only institute working on this in the world, which is very unlikely. And check the guide for authors here if there is any type of style references that they require, or they give a maximum number of references or even a minimum number of references. It's all possible. All right, then we move into the peer review process. So I'm going to give you a bit of an idea of what happens once you actually have submitted your research to that particular journal, and you have only chosen that one journal. Now, I appreciate that I can't see who you are, but I hope that you don't feel that this is what would happen, where you go and you are being, the paper's knocked to bits before it hopefully reaches acceptance. This is effectively how it works. You've got you as the author at the left side of this illustration. Then there's the editor part, and then there's the reviewers. You start, of course, submitting your paper to your required journal that you have chosen. Does it meet the basic requirements? If yes, then it will be assigned to reviewers. And it can be 2 reviewers, it can be 3, it can be even 5 reviewers, depending on your field of subject. Reviewers are researchers like yourself. These tend not to be people that are doing this just professionally. And they are also at different institutes, of course. They review and they give recommendations. And based on those recommendations, and first of all, there's accept or reject. There is accept immediately, but that's very, very rare. But you can be the exception to the rule. Most likely, it's going to be a direct reject because either the paper it doesn't fit with the aim and scope of the journal. It can be because there's too many of those types of papers already being published in the journal, and you're competing with very similar papers at the same time, and so forth. Please don't despair, because we all get rejected at one point or another, and this is fact of life. But it's more likely that you will find that you receive a revised decision. And then there is major revisions and minor revisions. Major revisions may finally get published in a journal, but they do have significant flaws currently in the paper that need to be corrected in order for the editors to actually make a decision to accept. Can be textual modifications, but most likely there are additional experiments or data that they wish to see more of that would require a major revision. Minor revision, however, is, basically the editor and the reviewers already feel that the manuscript is pretty good shape and is probably worth publishing in that journal. Maybe requires some elements to be clarified or restructured. Usually it's shortening of the paper that is required, textual adaptations and so forth. But do remember that even if it's a minor revision, doesn't mean that you will actually get accepted in this particular journal. They might still reject you in the end. When you're revising your manuscript, please draft a very detailed response letter, and letter, of course, in the submission system. With each reviewer comment, copy and paste it and respond to it accordingly. Be very specific as to what you have changed in the manuscript, or maybe what you haven't changed in the manuscript. It can be that the reviewer or reviewers of your paper are working on something very similar, or don't actually get the context, and they might have misinterpreted your research. That can also be true. Please be polite. Sometimes reviewers can be quite harsh in their decisions and their comments, but please stay polite. That's the way to go. And yeah, these people have actually put in their time and effort, so make sure that you really put in the time and effort to respond to them as well. To increase their likelihood of acceptance, please adhere to these steps. Please be consistent, as I said before. Check and recheck before you submit your response and your revised paper. Make sure you tell it in a logical, clear manner, just like you have written your paper. And really do take note of the reviewers' comments. They are there to actually improve your paper and your research. This is really going to increase your likelihood of getting accepted. So it is well worth doing this. All right, now we'll get into the last part of the presentation here. It's all about ethics, but it's also about generative AI, which is certainly part of what we do on a daily basis now. So let me get into ethics first. Obviously, as an author, you have a lot of rights and privileges, but you also have a responsibility to be ethical. If we all do this as authors, then we can feel comfortable to read each other's research and then also see that, find that it's true and that is something that we can use in our own research. There is, I guess, two areas of ethics in publishing. There's a scientific misconduct and there's a publication misconduct. So scientific misconduct is really falsification of results or images. And this is really based on, error. Publication misconduct can be in the terms of plagiarism, so using somebody else's work as your own. Can also be duplicate submissions or duplicate publications. So submitting or publishing in varies in different journals at the same time, which is obviously not allowed. Inappropriate acknowledgement of prior research and researchers, so not actually giving other people the credit that is due. Also inappropriate identification of co-authors, maybe leaving people out or adding people that didn't actually do anything. And of course, there's also conflict of interest. One image that I just found on the internet the other day, which I thought was very cute, was the copy bar and the pasty bar. Obviously, this is not the way to do it. So then one thing to underline here is that correct citation is really key. Giving people that have worked on this problem alongside you or before you the correct credit by citing their papers, citing their research. It puts your research in context, right? It really adds to the field and make sure that you fit with these people that are your peers and maybe your superiors. It does acknowledge the findings of others and really makes you part of that group. And it is a wonderful way to maintain this credibility and accuracy of scientific literature, right? Then conflicts of interest, which was my last point just now, they can come in different ways. And there's 4 examples here. There's direct financial conflict, so either the researcher is employed by or owns stock in a particular company. Indirect financial conflict can be somebody that is consulted by a company and is commissioned to do research work. There's a career or intellectual conflict where the researcher submits a paper to a journal with an editor-in-chief that they might know or that resides at their university. There can be an institutional conflict where the researcher is employed by a university or institute that has made public statements that it is firmly on one side of a particular scientific subject. So there's that political aspects as well. And then there's personal beliefs conflict. An example is, a doctor who abides by traditional healing practices writes an article on emerging medical technologies. That's usually not something that can be done. One way, of course, to properly do this and to handle this is make sure that these potential conflicts of interest are transparent and you disclose them. There's always request for conflict of interest statement with pretty much any journal nowadays. Please disclose this and use it also in your cover letter, for example, to the journal editor, just so that they know. All right, then we move into the last part of the presentation, which is on generative AI, Gen AI, and how this fits obviously with scholarly publishing nowadays. So first of all, a little bit about generative AI. I don't think I have to tell you, but of course it's an umbrella term for learning algorithms, and those make a prediction and can produce new content based on a given input or prompt, right? While traditional AI can analyze data and tell you what it sees, generative AI or Gen AI can use that same data to create something new, and that is quite different. There's, of course, ChatGPT, there's Bard, there's Bing, there's all these other large language models that are currently in use. But by and large, these are based on consumer type of information and not necessarily are usable in science. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead, conscious of time right now, just to quickly give you an idea of the key concerns that we have related to Gen AI in scientific writing and publishing. So depending on the sources an LLM uses, the large language model uses, incorrect information can be generated, and that includes references and authors. There's a huge ethical concern right now that there's a lack of transparency as to whether consent was given or proper attribution was given to a certain source. Something that also should be taken into consideration is the environmental impact, of course, with computing power and so forth. Their information may not be up to date. Remember that LLMs can only feed on information that is on hand. They might not actually have access to certain sources. As with everything, the more efficient we try to make things, the more homogenized things tend to become. So yeah, that's not a good idea. And lastly, a huge concern for the scientific community is that consumer LLMs, like ChatGPT, are really not built to process scientific data. There is, of course, potential benefits that we can use. And one of them is terrific. It can save us time to discover information. One of the great benefits I've seen is to polish language in papers. As I said before, the majority of the scientific world are not native English speakers after all, but we do need to actually publish in English. It is a way to find new research topics. Using it to write a lay summary is terrific because that's a way to actually promote your research to a wider audience, a non-scientific audience maybe. It can support education by generating quizzes, for example, and chatbots can actually answer questions. What it builds on top of traditional AI is that it can translate research that is not written in English and therefore improve accessibility for local language research. Right now, AI is already helping publishing the publishing process by checking submissions for completeness, plagiarism, references, etc. It can generate a rather nice list of recommended reviewers for editors to use. That's something we also do. Just remember the tool I just showed you in the beginning of the presentation, Journal Finder, that uses AI to suggest relevant journals to submit to. And lastly, it can help design a more friendly, user-friendly workflows, like for example, like text mining, process automation, etc. It is, it does raise a lot of questions. A lot of universities and publishing organizations have already created policies as to do's and don'ts and how to use generative AI. This is, of course, a really rapidly changing scene in space. So these policies and guidelines are likely to, shift a lot. So do keep note that you keep on top of this as things go on. And depending on the publisher that you actually publish with, and they might not or might allow the use of generative AI if properly acknowledged. And that's when I want to just show you what Elsevier does, and what Elsevier allows authors to do, for example. Right now, for now, authors may only use generative AI to improve the language of their paper, which I think, once again, is the best use of this tool right now. Make sure that it needs, that you clearly acknowledge that you used ChatGPT, for example. In the acknowledgement section, Gen AI can therefore not be an author, as I said before. When it comes to figures and images, these can't be generated by using an AI tool, of course. The exception, of course, is for those of you that are designing or researching generative AI. In computer science, that is, of course, allowed. Then editors and reviewers aren't allowed to upload a manuscript in an AI tool because that would actually compromise your author rights. The moment it is uploaded, for example, in ChatGPT actually has access to your manuscript that may not be part of the public domain yet, but then it's added. And it is similarly true for review reports, decision letters, and so forth. those cannot be actually uploaded in any type of Gen AI tool. Just to summarize here, it's all about being responsible and using the Gen AI tools in a responsible way, and actually disclosing their use if you are going to use them. We as Elsevier are here to protect the rights of you as authors and ensure confidentiality and data privacy. Elsevier is watching this space, of course, continuously and aligning its policies and guidelines with other STM organizations around the world. And if you click on our policy page, there's more Q&A there available, because there's a lot to cover there. And there's also a way to raise additional questions and concerns that you may have, because we're learning as we go along, and your input is therefore extremely valuable. Then last but not least, you might have seen that all these slides are labeled as Researcher Academy. There's a Researcher Academy platform that is free for all researchers around the world. Just simply sign up to it. There's a tremendous amount of offering of free lectures, more details as to what I've just covered, but also on, writing your first grant, writing an article for a book, for example, I&D in research, more on ethics and so forth. So do consider joining the Research Academy and look out for the live webinars as well. That concludes my particular part of this session. Vishal, if you want to stop recording, then we can go into the Q&A.